Our main presenter today is Sherri Kendall, the Chief Executive Officer of AVDA, which stands for AIDS to Victims of Domestic Abuse. And if that sounds familiar, that is the same organization that we donated toys and clothes and Christmas presents to some of their clients this holiday. Sherri is both a veteran in the field of domestic violence and a survivor. For over 30 years, she has worked with survivors and abusers in Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas, advocating for an end to domestic abuse. Much of her career has been spent working with perpetrators of abuse, recognizing the need to hold batterers accountable and to provide tools for change. Sherri is a licensed professional counselor and sits on various local and statewide domestic violence task forces. She believes that it takes a coordinated community response to impact a culture which accepts domestic violence as a norm and asks everyone to speak out against abuse. Please welcome Sherri Kendall.
Thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate everything that you did over the holidays. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that was just phenomenal. Thank you, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you. Also, thank you to Mike for allowing me to be here today, and thank you to Fred. Let's see, where's Fred? For asking me. And I will tell you that when Fred made the ask for me to come and speak with y'all, it was both with enthusiasm and trepidation that I said yes. And the enthusiasm was because I absolutely wanted the opportunity to come say thank you to this wonderful community of people who took it upon themselves to make the holidays just so very, very different for a couple of our clients and their children, and it was huge. The trepidation part, I was telling my staff on Friday that Sunday's going to be really scary because I'm going to be talking to a room of really smart people. And they may call me on stuff. They may ask me, what's the basis for what you're saying. So it is a little scary, but I'm incredibly grateful. So the title today is From Victim to Survivor. When people come in to see us at AVDA, they're walking in as victims. Our job is to help them leave and walk out the door as survivors. And I think that it takes all of us to help make that happen. It's a big job. There's a lot of different needs that victims have to make that transformation, and that's why it takes a village. So let's see if I can. So some of you know a little bit about AVDA, but I'm going to real quickly tell you a little bit more. Most of you have never heard of us outside of that wonderful holiday giving program. But we've actually been around for 35 years. We're a nonprofit that's been serving the Houston community all that time. We are a nonprofit, we are secular. We've actually, in the last year, I've been turned down for funding because I was told we were too secular. So it, again, takes a village. We need help from all different parts of the community to make this work happen. Probably the most, the one service we're most well known for is our legal services. We provide free legal representation to victims of domestic violence. You can imagine if you are, let's say, a mom, we'll be gender specific here for a minute, but we certainly don't have to. Abuse can happen to anyone. But if I'm a mom with 3 kids, I'm being abused, I need to leave, I want to leave, but I've been told, you can never leave me, you can't afford to get an attorney to divorce me, I will fight for the custody of these kids, you will never get them. I'm stuck, right? So it's important that there is a free legal organization out there that can do protective orders, divorces, child custody, child support. We also don't believe it's enough to just work with the victim, because what's going to happen if we don't work with the abuser? They're going to continue to make victims, right? So, and that's really where most of my 30 years has been. It's been working with domestic violence offenders, because if we don't give them the tools and we don't hold them accountable, then the problem continues. So that's a big focus we have as well. We also have a trauma counselor on staff. Of course, we've got to work with our youth, and we've got to work with them early. And so that's another area that I want to focus on today. For those of y'all who had to listen to me about a year or 2 ago, I promise you it's not going to be the same presentation. We're going to get into some different stuff this time, and youth is going to be part of that. Also, there needs to be somebody on a statewide organizational, institutional level trying to make change in our legislation. And so AVDA has always been part of that too. We helped create the family violence units at HPD. We've been involved in a lot of different things behind the scenes. I want to go back to It Takes a Village again, and Houston Oasis's piece of that. And back to last December and the wonderful work that you did So there's some folks that you're going to recognize. No, we had to Photoshop in the blue streak. The picture we found on Facebook didn't have the blue streak in it. But I want to especially thank these people. Y'all can see Mike, the little green elf down here. We know that there were a lot of you involved in it, but we want to have a little fun with that and say thank you. We know it took a lot of work and a lot of generosity. And I want to read to you just a little bit. I wasn't in the room the day that people came to get their presents. And what we actually did for our families, we had a holiday party. But one of the families that you adopted, Mom couldn't get off work that day. And I was reading a comment just yesterday. It says that Melissa came a day early to pick up gifts for her kids because she couldn't take off work to go to the party. She started looking through the bags to find her children's gifts when she realized that all the bags were her children's gifts. And she broke into tears. And she was so incredibly touched by what you all did. I understand it took 3 people to help her get out, to carry things to the car. That's how incredibly generous you were. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And these people are oftentimes leaving home with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And they've got children who don't understand that. They don't understand why things have changed so much. And you absolutely made a huge difference for that family. Then there's another, this is one of the other families. This is Maria Isabel, Sergio, and Joseph. Similar situation. She walked in the door. The moment she walked in and she saw what you all had done for them, she burst into tears. And I understand that they only spoke Spanish, so we don't know what they were saying. They just talked. The little boys were so excited the whole time they were there. They got to meet with Santa. They got to make ornaments, and we made it a party. But again, thank you all. You made a difference in the lives of 2 families in a tremendous way. And I think that's really what it's about. It's about feeling supported by community. I want to share with you what looks like a pretty dire statistic. So 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. Now, I actually am really jazzed about that figure. And the reason is, in the 30 years I've been doing this, as far back as I can remember, it was 1 in 3. This year, I saw a shift. And that, for me, especially as a survivor, is hugely exciting. Does it mean we have a long ways to go? Absolutely. But we are making progress. And that's borne out also by, I hate to talk about homicide statistics, but you all already started off on death and dying, so why not? We'll just go there anyway. Death, dying, and domestic violence. What a fun Sunday. But we know that the rates of death are, it's hard to quantify verbal abuse. It's hard to quantify sometimes even assaults that are not extremely physical. But we can quantify fatalities. And we think sometimes it's worse because we hear about it so much, but that's just because I think we're starting to care about it more. It's in the news more. But when you actually look at the rates, we absolutely are making progress, and it's a very exciting thing. You all already know this, but domestic violence can occur with a current or former married, cohabitating, or dating partner. Of course, it can be the same gender. The LGBT community doesn't get off any easier than the hetero community. Varies in frequency. And it occurs a lot of different ways. We've got the chronic battery in the middle, but it rarely ever starts there. Insults, put downs, you may have that one hit. Intimidation, electronic monitoring, and social media. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But it looks different in every relationship. I'm confident that what happened to me isn't how it looks for those other, let's see, we're at 1 in 4. So I've got some other compadres in the room with me I know that have gone through this. But we all experience something different. So just because it looks different doesn't mean it's not life-threatening and it's not life-changing. Talk about the cycle of abuse just a little bit. We're going to get on to other things we haven't talked about before. But on the cycle of abuse, it kind of begins with the tension building for a lot of people, and there's that incident, whatever that incident may be. After that, what has to happen? To keep somebody in that cycle, it can't be bad all the time. So that's when you have the reconciliation, the hearts and flowers, the honeymoon phase, because it's going to be much, much more difficult to control that person if there's not some hope that it's going to get better. And that's why I think, and of course, then there's a calm period and then it starts over again. I think that's why it's really important that as a community, we recognize that people are not always in a phase that's identifiable as abuse. So it may not make sense to us. It's like, oh, we see this really happy couple. That can't be them. Absolutely it can be, because they may be in that honeymoon phase. And of course, most of this happens behind closed doors. So it is important to always be, looking for warning signs, be willing to ask questions, be open, not be judgmental. I'm glad that we already went that direction a little bit earlier in our community moment, but to always have our eyes and ears open. So this is a statistic I'm not quite as happy about. February is Teen Dating Abuse Awareness Month. That's kind of a mouthful, but it's kind of a nice opportunity for me to say, okay, that's one of the things I'd like to address today. How many of y'all have teenagers? How many of y'all have been teenagers? It's going to apply to all of us in one way or another. So what we know, unfortunately, is that one in 3 teens is going to experience dating abuse. And that's not a statistic that I'm happy with. I don't think y'all are happy with that either. And we absolutely can change that. It's been going on forever. I mean, I think certainly there were incidences of it back when there's a lot of you that are younger than me in here, back when I was young. But it looks a little different maybe than it used to. So I should have asked too, how many of y'all have grandchildren that are teenagers, because that's going to get a few more hands going out. So let's talk about the warning signs on that, because one of the things about, Fred and I were talking earlier about the faith community, so we're the secular community as well, that gathers together to support and care about each other. I think it's important that you know about warning signs, because you may be first responders. Especially Mike, anyone in the room here who works with youth. Some of you in your professional lives have those opportunities too. But if you're in a position for youth to come and talk, they may be coming in and disclosing domestic violence, and it's important to know about it. So the warning signs: seems afraid to disagree with his or her boyfriend or girlfriend, always does what their partner wants. And of course, a lot of this, it's going to apply to adult relationships as well. Excessive text messaging, phone calling, emailing, or visiting with boyfriend or girlfriend. Some of that's just, they're in love, but sometimes it is the downside of it. Stops hanging out with friends or participating in family activities, starts having declining grades, or missing school. And of course has injuries that he or she can't, they try to cover up or explain away. And I heard myself saying that he and she did, and I want to get that elephant out of the room real quick maybe. Sometimes people believe that when you've got a domestic violence presenter, that we're just assuming that it's always the male who's being the bad guy, it's always the female who's being the victim. So I just want to knock that out very quickly. We know that it can happen to anyone. We know when it comes to homicides that it tends to be about 2 to 1 on men being the perpetrator. But in my book, it doesn't matter what gender you are. We've got to stop it. Right? We've got to cut it out. And again, our kids are probably the greatest ones, the hidden victims in all of this. So it's incredibly important that we talk about it. So this is another one that I mentioned to Fred a little bit. When it comes to being that first responder, for those of you all who may have a young person disclose to you that they are either at risk or in the midst of dating abuse, ask them, are you afraid now? Do you feel you're in immediate physical danger? Do safety planning with them. Try to help them get safe. Ask them, what do they need? Does anybody else know that it's happening? And one thing we have to think about, sadly enough, is suicide. We know that suicide is a great risk to teens. I didn't realize it until a few days ago, but suicide is the third leading cause of death for teens, after accidents and homicides. So it is a huge, huge problem, and don't be afraid to talk about it. Also keep in mind there's a lot of people out there that can help you have those conversations if need be. Again, I mentioned earlier that we've always had this issue, but it does look a little bit different now. We're in a different era. And that's because there's a lot of electronic and technologically based abuse that goes on now that we didn't, even 10 years ago, we would not have been talking about this like we do today. So when you think about, again, I think young people, but also adults, are they restricting someone's friends? They decide who they can talk to on social media. Are they posting harassing or embarrassing images online? Of course, there's the whole sexting issue. Being afraid to not respond to calls. You had maybe a youth that's been sitting down at the dinner table and they get a text message, and maybe it's the family rule that you don't text during dinner. But if you see a panic come over them, like, no, I've got to respond to this, that's a red flag that should go up. So we do need to equip ourselves that things look different now than they used to. There's also another area of abuse that I've certainly not talked about it in this venue before, and I don't know if y'all ever think about it, but that has to do with these guys. But some of you all know this young lady on the left. That's Lucy. That's one of my pups. But we know there's a really strong intersection between domestic violence and the abuse of pets. Very, very powerful way to intimidate and control. And Lucy was part of a social media campaign that we did a little while back about ending abuse. We encouraged people, not only themselves, but to get their pets involved in the social media campaign. But when you do the research, and this is some pretty, how many of y'all have pets? I'm thinking most of the people in the room, right. You know they are part of your family, and they are a very kind of helpless part of your family. They rely on you for so much. 71% of pet-owning women entering shelters reported that their batter had injured, maimed, killed, or threatened family pets. This is a sad statistic. 32% reported their children had hurt or killed animals. Where is abuse learned? It's typically in the home and during childhood. So it's something that the good news about all of this is that it can be turned around and go the other direction, but we need to realize how common this is when there's domestic violence. 68% of battered women reported violence towards their animals. 87% of the time they were present. 75% of the time their children were present. 13% of intentional animal abuse cases involve domestic violence, and that's kind of a different direction to look at it. And between 25 and 40% of battered women are unable to escape because they're worried about their animals. And I've worked in shelters for a few years, heard that time and time again. And we get calls very, very frequently. Someone who's wanting to exit that relationship, but they're worried about their cat or their dog, in my case, my iguana. We love a lot of different animals. So it's important that we have some safeguards in place. And this is another piece of that good news. The more we know about the problem, the more we can create solutions to the problem. And so here's some things you can do, or things for you to be aware of that you can share with others if they're in that position. Hadn't thought about this before, but if you license and you vaccinate your pets, make sure that those registrations are in your name, and that proves your ownership. It's not up here, but we do protective orders. And increasingly, people are asking to have their pets put on their protective orders. So if you can prove ownership, you've got a much stronger chance of being able to have that animal on your protective order. Safety plan, don't leave the pets with the abuser. Be prepared to take them with you. A lot of shelters have, just do a lot of different creative things to make sure that the animals are safe. They have a lot of them have foster care programs, which I think is awesome. I know our shelter does. Arrange temporary shelter for your pets with a vet, a family member, trusted friend, or a local animal shelter. Given the size of this group, as distressing as it may seem, someone in this room or one of your family members may have need for this. Consider finding out what your resources are within Houston Oasis, who might be willing to actually do that fostering. And Houston SPCA has a program called Pet Safe. And that allows victims to board their animals free of charge for up to 30 days. Awesome resource. Again, if we know what people need, we can try to get that need met. Oh, this is also one of my guys. This is Rocky. He's a monster. If anybody needs a dog, got one for you. Very spirited. Fred's met him, right, Fred?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Face to face.
Yeah, he's a challenge.
Paws on my shoulder.
Yes, very friendly guy, very friendly. So I think sometimes it's easy in this work to get caught up in, and not even just domestic violence, but it's easy to get caught up in, that's just how society is. It will never change. Some of the things we've heard through the years about domestic violence, well, boys will be boys. We're just born that way. I'm not even willing to say, well, it's just our culture. we can change our culture. We've been changing our culture. Houston Oasis, I think, is engaged in changing culture and in challenging the norms. And so there's always good news. Yes, there's a lot of work to do, but as a village, as a group together, we absolutely can get there. I think sometimes people use that we can't do anything about it as an excuse to not do anything about it. So I would say let's take away the excuses, let's find ways to get engaged. And again, it takes a village. So thinking about Houston Oasis in particular, I was, what are some of the things that you can do as a community that cares about each other? Certainly listen and believe when victims speak out. Prepare to be a resource. And that takes a little bit of work, and that's part of why I'm grateful that you allowed me to be here today, because if you know about organizations who are doing the work, and we don't do all the work, we do a very limited piece of helping transform victims to survivors, but we have a tremendous wealth in this community of partners, and we can help people find the right services to build better lives. Become a safe space. Educate the community and the congregation. And when it says use evidence-based curriculum, I don't know in your youth and teen program if you have an opportunity or if you create opportunities to talk to them about dating abuse, healthy relationships, what do you do if you're experiencing domestic violence in your home. But there's some great curriculum out there. Be happy to help you find something that might fit for this community. Speak out, use a bulletin, newsletter, etc. Intervene. It's all about safety and accountability. Do you know what I mean by bystander intervention? That's a phrase that's become kind of familiar in the last year or two with a lot of people. It's hugely important that we not just stand by and do nothing. If you see something going on, there's always an opportunity. And I know people get worried about their safety, and you should be worried about your safety. But something as simple as I know that I have been driving down the highway before, and I've seen an argument on the side of the road. I'm not going to stop and pull up and get out of my car. Not going to do that. What I am going to do is call 911. And what I've done before is to go down to the next exit, come back, turn around, come back, and then either honk my horn or flash my lights. Something that just lets someone know, I see that. I'm guessing some of y'all have been there in the grocery store before, when maybe an exasperated mom or dad was, really upset with the kid. It's hard to watch, and some of us have been there. Kids are not always easy, but just letting somebody know that you see what's going on. Maybe asking, in that case, can you help? Always assess your own safety, but there's always something that we can do. But of course, it starts with you. We kind of went congregation first, but we're going to get more micro. It absolutely starts with you. And some of this is very, I guess, kind of tried phrases that you've heard a million times, but it's so true in this instance. Be the change you want to see. Because if you're not modeling the behavior, no one's going to listen to you when you ask them to act in a different way. So whether it's for our kids or whoever, we've got to actually be that person. Silence is the voice of complicity. I so believe that. We've got to speak up. We've got to speak out. If we're silent, pretty much saying it's okay. I'm okay with that. So we've got to find our voice. I'm losing mine. I apologize for that. Again, something you all do well, challenge the norms that promote, excuse, or justify abuse. Back to that bystander intervention. But it is difficult. I mean, y'all are such a courageous group in my mind, in this community, to say, no, we don't believe what everyone else believes. We've got our own beliefs, and this is what they are. And it really does take courage in this society. But there's a version of that for domestic violence as well that takes courage. One of the things I wanted to mention, simple things. If somebody's telling an inappropriate joke, a joke that degrades women, or maybe the LGBT community, or their looks are intimidating to someone, any of that. Again, if we're silent, we're condoning it. So you absolutely can use your voice to make a difference. Use your spheres of influence for good. So of course your sphere of influence begins with you. Next circle out from that you have tremendous influence on. Family. Beyond that, friends. Beyond that, your co-workers. It goes on and on and on. So if you think, no, I'm just me, what difference can I make? You have a huge, huge sphere of influence, and you can impact so many people. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I think you probably can tell I already believe that. And as much as anything, don't give up. There's absolutely too much at stake. I think over the years that I've been doing the work, it's been tempted at times to just hang it up and say it's time for somebody else to do it, but we can't. We've all got people we care about who are going to be impacted by this if we don't do something about it. Again, we are making progress, so I think that's something that can kind of keep our tanks full. This year at ABDA, in our abuser program, I know of at least 2 incidences in which we lost the battle. We had at least 2 clients who have taken someone's life. And it's tragic. I mean, it's hard to come back to work on Monday when you know something like that has happened over the weekend. But we can't stop. We're making progress. We've got to keep on that road. So one of the things I wanted to leave you with is say, if you want to do this work with us, come find us. You already have, to a great extent, the way you started in December. Fred and Susan both have helped ABDA by supporting our gala, and they got to have fun while they did it too. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. If not ABDA, find another organization or find another way, but we would love to have you as part of our family. Volunteer, I did not bring it up here with me, but there's forms back there at the back. There's a sign-up sheet. There's one of the things I really am excited about. We are starting a court accompaniment program, and we need volunteers. It can be male or female. It does need to be someone who's got some time in the daytime. But imagine, we just had a request this week. We had a young woman who had been stabbed multiple times about a year ago. We represented her in protective order and divorce, but now it's time for the criminal case. And she called and said, can somebody please go with me to court? I don't want to be in that courtroom with them. And so we found an advocate that worked with her before, and they went along. And you could be that person. It could be incredibly impactful. We need help in the office. You probably have so many different talents in this room. If you wanted to get involved, I'm confident we could use you. Of course, there's always need for financial support. And consider checking out our gala in October. Here's just some resources. I've got business cards with me, but again, sign up back there. I want to say thank you all for everything that you do. I know you helped us, but you've helped so many other organizations and across this community. And thank you again for your commitment, your courage, and your generosity. Thank y'all very much.
We have time for a few questions. So
Only ask me easy ones, okay?
okay.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
thank you for that excellent talk. In my line of work, I run across a fair number of victims of domestic violence and people at risk for it. So that raises 2 questions in my mind. One is, does your organization provide or coordinate services in languages other than Spanish and English? That's one question. 52 languages, great. So, and then what's the status currently of shelter availability? Because my impression is that it's not terribly good.
Unfortunately, you're right. And my son also, he works in a shelter. He works at the Fort Wayne County Women's Center. And we've got very close collaborations with those. Beds are full almost all the time. It's a very, very sad situation. They're looking, though, again, systemic change. We're looking at creating more transitional housing so that we get those. There's a lot of people who are staying in shelter in an emergency. They may have gone into it in that way. So the beds are too full. We need to get some of those folks out into more transitional, less high security housing. We also know that if we've got connections, we can help get people in. So I would say to you, if you have somebody, they need help, call me. I'll call my ED buddies at the other shelters and see what I can do to help them.
Is your legal staff volunteer-based?
No, they're staff. They're fully paid staff. We've got 7 attorneys on staff full time and 7 paralegals. That's why it takes money to run this business. Now their hearts are good as gold. They're family law attorneys doing nonprofit work, but it's incredibly satisfying work. So they don't mind taking a little bit of a pay cut.
Sherri?
From an attorney.
Yes. Sherri, it occurred to me, if there's a lack of beds, is it feasible to think about taking people in, letting them stay in your spare bedroom? Everybody in here's got a spare bedroom. Is that feasible?
It's how the movement started, I will say. We call them safe homes, and somebody would just have a home that they would allow that. I think you've got to assess for safety. A really highly lethal situation, you probably don't want to do that. Probably not fair to you or to them, but especially if you've got a friend, or you've got a friend who has a friend, because you don't want to be the first place they would look. But I've done it, and I'm sure I would do it again, but very individual choice. So it's a lovely thing to ask them. Thank you.
I know recently, as part of the executive orders that Obama did on gun control, one of them had to do with making it harder for abusers to get guns. Do you see that law as potentially being effective in the long run as it's written?
It's going to end all, I would say number one, the number one weapon used to kill women, at least, is guns. There's no doubt about it. And I have worked with men who have said that, let me back up more. In this community, there's just too many guns. You know, I think most of the people that are in our community who are committing domestic violence aren't going out that day to buy the gun to kill the partner. Most of them probably already have guns, so it's going to be limited. But for that person who's more impulsive, absolutely. But we also have to enforce. For now, if you've got a protective order, you're forbidden to have a firearm. Are they checking? No. When the judge says, so did you give your gun away? Oh, yes, judge. Gave it to my brother. That's not enforcement. So I think we have some laws in place that are already pretty solid. But yeah, we need to make it as hard as we can.
Yeah, we probably ought to, we got to wrap it up, because before you leave the podium, we have Laura's going to come up with a special presentation.
I had the opportunity to visit ABDA's offices back in November and just talk to Sherri about what their needs are as an organization and how we could help. And one thing she did mention is that often when clients come to their offices, sometimes it's the whole family that comes, not just mom or dad. And often while waiting for their appointments or while waiting for their parents who are in counseling, you'll have people sitting and waiting for a very long time in this office, and there's not much to do. So, in that, because of that, Oasis is giving a Rubik's Cube and an Etch-a-Sketch to provide entertainment for people while they're waiting to be seen. We are also going to be, if you look at the magazine rack at ABDA, it's kind of, there's not much there. We did find a crystal catalog while we were going through it, so if any of the clients want to order fine crystal while they're waiting to be seen. So we are also going to be giving them 2 magazine subscriptions. One is for Real Simple magazine, and another one is, as she mentioned, they provide services in 52 different languages. A lot of their clients, Spanish is their first language. So we're going to be getting them, I can't remember the name of it, it's a bilingual highlights magazine for Spanish and English speakers. It's for children who are both learning English and who are learning Spanish. So it kind of meets the bilingual need that they have.
Thank you all.